Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Mental Health Over Coffee. Today I have a special guest, Andrea.
Hi!
And we will be talking about depression. So grab your cup of coffee and join us.
Hi guys, my name is Andrea, and I'm here to talk about my life with depression and anxiety and how I cope with it.
Great, so let's get started.
Yay!
So tell me, when did you first find out that you had depression and how did you get diagnosed?
It was interesting. I started getting sick to my stomach all the time, and then with that idea of getting sick and not really knowing what was going on, it became a big anxiety thing for me. And then I would just be absent from school, and then eventually I remember I would just be really upset all the time, crying all the time. I would go to school, come back home, and I'd be crying, and my parents started really getting desperate. At first they thought it was growing pains, so they thought, okay, it's just her going through puberty, she's going through a stage, but it started getting worse. I wasn't getting out of bed, I wasn't really communicating, and so eventually my parents then took me to a child psychiatrist, and then they started talking to me and they realized, okay, she has depression.
How old were you?
I want to say I was 12 when that started happening.
I talk to a lot of people from day-to-day who suffer from depression, and a lot of them tell me, especially when it comes to their parents or their family members or friends, that they tell them that it's just a phase, that you're just going to grow out of it.
It was like that. So I come from a Hispanic background, and when I was 12, mental health wasn't something that was well known, and it was, I think from my parents, it was more of the kind of the idea of where do we mess up, and then also I don't even think they really understood what was going on. So for them, it really was. They thought that it was a phase. My family, I remember my grandmother thinking that I was just being a rebel without a cause, because there really wasn't a cause per se. And I remember my aunt sitting down and talking to me and asking me to please just, get out of this, that I need to do this because it's stressing out my parents. And I remember while they would talk to me, in my mind I said, I just can't, I just don't want to.
No,
I couldn't do it.
Yeah, it's definitely not something you get over, and you can't just walk it off, which is a misconception, because everyone's felt sad from time to time.
Yeah, and it's different. It's not, when you're depressed, it's not that you can go out and then you get cheered up and then you're good. It's kind of like, it's always there. It's always in the background. It's like a backdrop, like your background. So you can go out and I can have a good time with friends or something, but I'm still, it's like a mask. So you put it on, but in the back you're still really upset and you're just not happy. And it was interesting because when I went to school and I was with my friends, they didn't know anything about it because it was a mask. I was kind of numb. So I just went through the motions, and then when I got home, when I didn't need to pretend to be something else, then
You let it out.
Yep.
And so how hard was it to go on day to day with that mask on?
I think when I was young, I guess it wasn't as tough as it was when I got older. Because when I was young, I was a kid, so I think it was easier for me to be upset and for me to be, people just kind of assumed that it was when I was a kid and she's just being a teenager. So that wasn't too much of an issue. I don't remember it having to really think okay, I had to hide it. It was more like my friends, I didn't think much about it. I just knew I'm having issues and I didn't get it. But when you get older and then I'm having difficulties coping with things that happen with life, it's a little bit different, because then you kind of have an introspect where you're a little bit more familiar with how people should be, I guess, and how the way that they would react to things was so different from the way that I would react to things. So then it was difficult for me to put up a mask and be okay, because at that time too, what started happening is, at first I had depression, and then eventually that started becoming anxiety.
Yeah, sure. No, one thing that a lot of people don't know is that anxiety and depression go hand in hand
Yes.
a lot of times.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that was the big thing for me. I had depression, and because of that, I started having the anxiety about it because I was so upset that I think it developed into an anxiety of, oh my God, I don't want to be feeling this low. Because when you feel it, it's heartbreaking. It's kind of like somebody dies, but nobody died, and you feel that way all the time.
Wow.
So then I started getting anxious because I felt like, oh my God, I'm gonna have this forever, and it's not gonna go away. And then the anxiety just created more anxiety, and everything just kind of was a vicious circle.
So what would you say is the hardest part of living with depression?
I think the hardest part for me, so when I got diagnosed when I was a kid, I think it was easier because what we did a lot was just working with the symptoms. So we were just working on how to get out of it, but not really understanding what was the psychological issues behind that. So I got medication, and I talked to my therapist every week on coping mechanisms. Then when I got older, I think it got a little bit harder because it kept on coming back. So it would go away, and then it would come back, like multiply, and then I would kind of cope with that, and then it'll come back again. And so I realized that when I got older, there was a depression, and yeah, there was some chemical imbalance with it, but there was also things that I had, and that I had to deal with. Because if I didn't deal with those just kind of still continued being my trigger. And
So you were learning how to cope, but then you realized as you got older that there was stuff there that was triggering you?
So for me, the way it happened with me is I was depressed when I was young, so in middle school. And then I went to therapy. I got prescribed Zoloft, I think it was. And I started taking that, and that helped me get out of it. I got out of that. I think I got out of that. I don't remember because this is a while ago. So I stopped taking it, and then I got better. But what had originally developed that depression was that I had gotten sick to my stomach, and it was just some issues with digestion. I think it was really IBS, but it was because I was an anxious kid, and I had gotten some changes too because I had immigrated to the United States at that time. So I think all of that kind of convoluted into this one depression. So after I was a kid and I got back, and I went through the therapy and I took the medicine and I got better, it went away to the point where I was, okay, I'm back to being a normal kid. But there were things that stuck with me from that. So for example, the anxiety that I developed from it ended up giving me a lot of issues, like control issues, kind of like these obsessions. So they were, I think, a way of me controlling my life. So I became really a perfectionist, and things have to be such, and I put a lot of pressure on myself. And I think that had a lot to do with anxiety too, because in my head was, if I have everything perfect, or if I have things the way that I have, it will not trigger an anxiety attack and therefore not give me depression, or the other way around. Or if everything is okay, then I'm not going to get depressed and I'm not going to have anxiety.
So depression symptoms can be different for everybody. Some people experience it with crying spells and can't get out of bed and lack of motivation. Others can go to work, and to everybody else they may not seem like they have depression, which is why it's really hard for some people to express to others that they have it, because others are not really taking them seriously. So what are your symptoms? What do you deal with on a day-to-day basis?
So for me, when I have these extreme bouts of depression, usually I'm really super sleepy all the time. I'm crying all the time over everything. It feels like I can't get out of bed. And most of the time I do. I just sit there and I lay, and I don't have the strength to move. Everything is really difficult for me to deal with. And whenever I have depression, it comes with anxiety. So the depression, for me, it's kind of weird to say this, but with the depression, it's brought on a lot of anxiety. So I'd rather almost have that depression than have anxiety, because anxiety makes it have a harder time to just go on with everyday life. So with the depression, yeah, I feel like crap the whole time, and I don't want to do anything, and I'm not really taking care of myself. I'm not putting on makeup. I'm just going through the day like a zombie. But with the anxiety, it's a little bit harder to hide, because I'm freaking out, so I need to be like, either like I want to run out the door, or I'm shaking, or like my hands or something. It just feels tight. So, but they usually both go hand in hand. So if I'm having a really bad bout of depression, it's usually mixed with depression, and then if I have a rest from that where I kind of feel a little bit better, then automatically I have anxiety right next to it. And then that anxiety will go and bring me back to being depressed. So it's tough when I have it, but been, I guess, lucky enough to have a support system that kind of helps me catch it early enough, so that it doesn't go to a point where I'm going to have to seek help, or that I need to be accompanied by somebody. Because unfortunately with depression, you have suicidal thoughts and ideation, and it's not fun. And when I have that, I've learned to know when it's getting to that point. So now I just tell my mom, somebody's got to be with me, stick with me, and I'm going to be crying the whole time, but somebody needs to be there. And usually if I'm just too out of it to do it, my family has now learned enough that they know, hey, we're going to babysit you for a little bit until you get over this. And it just helps. Yeah, it's definitely something that's helpful.
The support network with any kind of depression is one of the most important things, because like you said, the suicidal ideation, just feeling like you're alone and that nobody cares about you, like you're never going to get out of it. And having that one person or two people, or however many people you have that are there next to you to remind you that this has happened before.
And that you're going to be able to get out of it.
So there are two things I want to follow up on. You mentioned about medication and therapy. So I want to see, what do you think has helped you the most? Do you feel like medication, therapy, or the combo of both?
For me, it definitely has been both. So, and kind of let me preface this. So with me, the idea of taking medication, I think a lot of people don't like that, because it kind of has a bad connotation to it. And I have to be honest, at first I wasn't a fan of that, and I tried to get off of that several times. But I've kind of learned to accept. It's kind of like, for me, it's thyroid. It's more like an imbalance. So I've learned to accept it as part of what I am. So that kind of helps me be at a baseline. It's not a super high dose or anything like that. I'm only taking sertraline because it keeps me to this normal baseline. But it doesn't, what can I say? It doesn't completely block off all my emotions or anything like that in such a manner that I'm no longer me, because I still definitely get anxiety, or I still get lows or highs or whatever that may be, but that's where that therapy comes in. So it's definitely a combination of both. The meds are there to help me kind of have some sort of sanity, so that I can reason through whatever I'm going through, and I can talk myself through it and all that good stuff. But I still go to therapy. If there's a time that I'm going, like I said, if there's something that I'm going through that's rough, or that I know I'm kind of worried about, or I'm not able to resolve on my own, I'll go ahead and set up an appointment with a therapist just to help me cope through it. So even recently, things as normal as I got my bachelor's degree, what was 3 years ago. So I got that, and I was so excited, and I graduated, but right after that, I went through a really big low, because it was a change. And with me, with depression and the anxiety, whenever there's a change, it just,
even a positive change.
Even a positive.
Because you graduated and you still felt
even a positive change, even things that are good for me or that I'm looking forward to, I have to kind of take a step back, and I'll get anxiety of it. I'll be super happy about it, but it's still change. So changes and things that are different for me, I have difficulty coping So that's where I have my meds, and that's when I'll go to therapy, and kind of like a maintenance therapy.
Oh yeah. So how often do you see your therapist? Has there been a change since you got diagnosed until now?
It depends. It really depends on what I'm going through. It depends on what's going on in life. So at first it was every week, and then when I started getting a little bit better through it, then it was every other week, then every 3 weeks, once a month, once every couple of months, until I felt that I was okay. But it was fortunate that I decided to go to that, because right around that time my grandfather got sick, and I love my grandfather to death, and he was diagnosed with cancer. So when he passed away, I had already been in therapy, and so I was able to work through it in a manner that was beneficial to me, because I had already been in it.
Of course. Had you not been in it, do you feel like it would have been much worse?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Because of course it was a big change. It was and like I said, I'm not good with changes. But it definitely was something that I don't think I would have been able to pull through as well as I did if it wasn't because of therapy. That's when I went back to once a week again, because it was just grief is something that's just completely different.
Of course. And it's important to know that, yes, you know, you might start off in therapy once every week, and then it might wean off, and then things will happen where you might need to go back to therapy. It's not just like a once in a lifetime thing.
It's not.
Yeah, it's a maintenance thing. It's part of the self-care routine, which you mentioned earlier. That was the second thing I wanted to follow up on. You mentioned I needed self-care. What do you do to self-care?
I really tried hard to be very self-aware of when I might be going through a path that's not quite right, and I'm not feeling comfortable. So that's my main thing about self-care, is be really aware of what I'm feeling, what I'm not feeling okay, not to force myself to do things, because now I understand that, okay, I'm somebody that's gonna need a little time to get used to something different. So when there's something that's coming, I'm aware of that, and I work on being like, okay, we're gonna take it a step at a time, and I'm going to talk myself through it, and I am going to work on even like physical care of my own. So I'll go maybe through the gym to work up that energy, to get that serotonin levels going up naturally, right? Or I'll try to eat a little bit better. So instead of eating all the sugary treats, because when you're depressed, you tend to look for sugar. I'll try to be like, well, I know I'm gonna eat all the sugar, but let me try to eat something more healthier. Let me do balanced proteins, veggies, and things like that, so that my body is healthy and strong to deal with whatever I need to deal with. Also do meditation. I'll do deep breathing. Sometimes I'll write things down. So all sorts of things depending on what I feel that's going to be the most beneficial for me at the moment. But always something there. And if nothing works, then I will just call my therapist, or I'll talk to friends or something. Because it's so, I guess it's so hard to think that you're the only person. It's so easy, rather, to think that you're the only person that's going through that. And then if you start to share and to be open, you see how many other people are going through the same thing. And it just makes you feel less alone. And then it helps you cope with things.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely sharing and knowing that therapy and friends are part of self-care. A lot of people think of self-care as just like, okay, let me go get a manicure, and that's good. Those are good self-care techniques, but having someone to talk to all the time, knowing when you need to go talk to someone, that's also part of the self-care.
Right, so it is, but I think it's self-care, I think for especially when it's mental health, it's kind of like your mindfulness, like your mind healthcare. And I'm not absolutely perfect at it. It's always a work in progress, because we're not. I can't sit here and tell you, like, guys, I got this. You know, I just guru yoga out and meditate all the time. No, it's not. I'm human and I'm stubborn, and after all these years, but yeah, definitely have to try on that.
Good. What has been the darkest time for you within depression? Like, what would you say this was like my rock bottom?
I think I definitely can think of 2 times. One was when I was 13, and I remember I just was so lost, and it's kind of silly, but this is deep stuff, guys, right? Like, so I had a little like pocket razor with that, I got like a Claire's, right? And it said like princess, and it was pink and glittery, right? And I was just so upset, and I just didn't know how to deal with it. I just wanted to like cut, right? And I remember just going into like my room and just crying hysterically and like trying to cut. And thank God for Claire's that, you know, knows that these are for little kids, and like there was nothing to it.
Yes.
So I mean, if anything, I think I could hurt myself more with like scratching myself. But when that happened, even as a kid, I was like, no, that's it. Like this is not good. I can't deal with this. I need help. So another rock bottom was, like I was saying, like that one breakdown that I had in college. It took a while to come out of that. It was hard. It was hard. I was more conscious of my feelings. It was embarrassing because it was in front of my student colleagues and people that I actually now work with. I ended up getting a job there, but so it was really embarrassing and hard, and I just didn't know how to deal with it. When you get sick in your mind, you get sick in your body. So then my stomach wasn't feeling good, and it takes a little bit to get out of that. I think people also don't know that whenever you have like anxiety or panic attacks or things like that, when they're done, you don't just kind of like, okay, I'm good. It takes a little bit to recoup.
Sure.
It's kind of like an accident. It takes a little bit to recoup. So that took a while to go, but again, like those rock bottoms have definitely taught me that, or it's been a bell in my head that's been like, okay, I need to do something. Something's not quite right here, and it's set me on a good path to go and get help and to work on whatever I need to work on.
And it sounds like that came out of a lot of years of like self-reflection and therapy and kind of talking to people and figuring it out, because now you identify your triggers and you know when it's time to.
Absolutely. So after all this time with all of that, I definitely identify my triggers. And then the other thing is, I think for so long, I didn't listen to myself, which is why I kept on getting anxiety and depression and things like that. I didn't listen to myself and what I needed or what I wanted to, so that now my body is fine. So every time there's something that I don't like, automatically I start feeling tight and tense and anxious and uncomfortable. And I get that feeling inside of me, and I know that for me, that's a bell. Like, okay, what is it that you're doing here that you're not happy about? Like, let's think about it. Let's process through it.
If somebody's watching this and they're feeling, you know, like they're depressed or they're going through anxiety, what would you want them to know? What would you say to them?
The thing that helped me the most when I was going through my anxiety, my depression, my obsession, my compulsion, whatever it is, the thing that really helped me the most was what my therapist told me. And she would just look at me and she would say, Andrea, this is going to end. You're not going to be like this forever, and it's going to end. And I think that's such an important message. And at the moment you don't see the end, but it is. It's not, you're not always going to be like this. And there is an end to it. And then for me, it was more like, well, there's an end, but then I feel it again and everything. But every time you learn to cope with it better, and every time just, I guess, like, it's gonna get better, and also accept it and don't fight it. And sometimes it's just natural. Let your body do what it needs to do. Even if it's not fun, you'll go through it, and then you'll move on, and it will get better.
And you said something really interesting, which is don't fight it.
Yes.
Because it's like, it's almost like counterintuitive. Like,
yes.
we want to fight anxiety, we want to fight depression, we want it to just go away, but sometimes just, you need to let your body just feel.
Yes, exactly. And that was the thing with me. Whenever I had the anxiety, it would bring me more anxiety, having that anxiety. And it was just kind of like a vicious cycle. And then one time, I just had the anxiety, and instead of being like, oh my god, I need to run away, I need to do something, I just let it come. So my boyfriend is fantastic because he's my go-to whenever I have anxiety. So he knows now. He doesn't quite understand it. It's okay. Not a lot of people understand it, but sometimes it's just about support. So he knows that when I'm having a moment where I'm not able to cope with something, he holds my hand really tight. he'll talk me through it, he'll distract me a little bit, or he'll be like, okay, let's breathe, let's take in some breaths, let's work through it, and he'll hold me tight, or even hugging helps a lot. So a lot of the tightness helps me a lot too. So,
and you mentioned, okay, obviously you have a relationship, you've been at the same job for years, you have friends. I know that with depression, it really it makes you feel like maybe you're tied up and you can't do a lot of these things. And I can imagine that there's been days where you didn't want to wake up and go to work. What do you do, and how do you cope on those days where you're just not feeling it?
That's a little bit tricky because I tend to push myself a little bit more than I should. So whenever I'm having those days where sometimes I should allow myself to just take a day off and everything, I actually tend to push through it, which is not necessarily the best fit for everybody, but that has kind of been the way that I push myself out of it and I get out of it. Sometimes I'll go crying in my car all the way to work, and I'll be crying at work while I'm typing, or I'll be looking for my friend Micheline, talking together. But yeah, sometimes for me it's just pushing through it. It's a fine balance because with depression, you sometimes have to push yourself to get out of it. You have to push yourself to see people, to talk to them. But at the same time, you also have to think about that self-care when it's okay to kind of take a moment, collect yourself and whatnot. So just take a deep breath, go out and walk. So when I didn't tell people, I would just walk around, take 15 minutes. Even just going outside kind of helps you ground yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it, as well as people who may be going through the same thing. Is there any final thoughts or anything that you would like to share that we didn't cover that you think would be important?
I guess, just like I said, you got this. It's not fun. I certainly can say that I've been working through this for a while, and some people get it and then they're done with it. Some people have it for a while, but it's okay. It's just another thing. It's kind of like how people have thyroid disease or they have diabetes or something like that. I don't know. And it's just something that's part of life. Sometimes it is a why me, but the truth is, I'd rather have that because it made me so much more knowledgeable of other people and their needs. And I think that that's something that I would never have gotten. I would never have gotten if I didn't deal with this.
That's great, turning it into like a strength.
Yes.
Like you're saying
Absolutely. Yeah. It is. And I'm an artist, so my emotions are, come out in my art, and I love it, and it helps me express myself. And yeah, sometimes I can be dramatic, and sometimes things, freak me out, but it also has made me very self-aware, and it's made me be really selective about the people that I surround myself with, because I know that they're good people that are going to support me and understand me. So something that, I can definitely say why me has become okay, I got this. So I'm sure you can too.
So you mentioned you're an artist, and we are going to link your website or your portfolio at the bottom in the description, so make sure to check it out. That is a strength, and to turn that energy into something positive.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's always outlets, all sorts of outlets. Creativity has been so beneficial.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you again for your time, and hopefully a lot of people heard you and heard your message, and you know that you're not alone, and there are lots of things out there to help you, friends, family, therapy, and you're not alone. So whenever you are feeling depressed or feeling like you just can't go on, just reach out to somebody, and remember what Andrea said, you will be okay, it will end.